mic check, please.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ducks Unlimited Podcast.
I'm your host, Dr. Mike Brazier.
I'm your host, Katie Burke.
I'm your host, Dr. Jared Henson. And I'm your host, Matt Harrison.
Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited Podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America. The DUPodcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing. Also proudly sponsored by Bird Dog Whiskey and Cocktails. Whether you're winding down with your best friend or celebrating with your favorite crew, Bird Dog brings award-winning flavor to every moment. Enjoy responsibly.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Ducks Unlimited Podcast. I'm your co-host, Matt Harrison. Joining with us today, to my left, also one of our very own, Nathan Ratchford, and our guest today on the Ducks Unlimited Podcast, and also a great friend of mine, Mr. Karl Gunzer, who is the director of the sporting dog group at Purina. We are so glad to have you on, Mr. Karl. Thank you so much for making the trip down. How you been?
I'm good. Good to be here. I wish we were back in a duck blind like last time I saw you, but that's all right.
I know. Yeah, I got to know Mr. Karl a couple years ago. I think that was the first time we had ever met was at Honey Break down in Louisiana.
Yep.
And we met there, got to spend a couple days chasing some ducks, and that was the beginning of our relationship, and the rest is history, and he's been a great friend of mine. And we are going to be talking about a little bit of all things dogs. Mr. Karl has an incredible background that's extremely interesting in this industry, and I'm going to let you talk a little bit about that. And Nathan's also going to chime in. He's very passionate about sporting dogs and is very knowledgeable too, and I wanted him to join on because I know both of y'all know a good amount about our wonderful sporting dogs. So before we get into all that though, Mr. Karl, I just kind of want you to give our listeners a little bit of a background of kind of how you got started and also how you ended up at the position that you're in at Purina.
Well, I don't know that we've got time for like the whole story, but I'll do and I don't know how exciting or interesting it is, but I grew up just a passionate dog guy. Like I had dogs and messed with dogs from the time I was 10, 12 years old, training dogs for neighbors. We had our own hunting dogs. And I went to college. I had a background in wildlife management. I went to work for the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation just out of college. But the whole time I was doing that, I was competing and training my Labradors. And so I was running hunt tests and started doing some field trials in Montana. And I took a week's vacation, went to California to train with a pretty well-known trainer out there in California. And at the end of the week of vacation, he offered me a job. So I quit the Elk Foundation, moved to California, and then spent the next 20-some years of my life training dogs. And so I did field trials. I was in Montana in the summer and Texas in the winter, or wherever. I would sometimes go to Florida or California or, wherever there was different circuits or different trials to run, And so I loved it. I had it was a great job. It was a lot of fun. I trained a couple high point Derby dogs. I trained a Canadian national champion, several national finalists in the United States, which actually the national championship is going on right now today. But, it's the 8th series of the Nationals. So anyway, I love training dogs, and I got to know all the folks from Purina and really appreciated how much Purina sponsored the sport, how much they did for, health and nutrition and dog care. And I just kind of became a big fan of the company. I loved it. And long story short, they offered me a job to come to work in the sporting dog division, sponsoring events and organizations, kind of like we do now with Ducks Unlimited and different nonprofits. So I did that about 13 years ago. I quit training and came to Purina and have been here since. So it's been fun. I miss training and competing, but of course I still have dogs and still mess around with dogs. I'm not competing right now, but I may do it again someday.
That's awesome.
What got you into Labradors to begin with, Karl?
That was just our family breed growing up. My dad was a duck hunter, and, I grew up on the Chesapeake Bay and just had labs from, I could remember. And so that's sort of what
Fell
we
in
just,
love with them.
yeah, that's what we had. And I don't know. They're a great breed. Obviously, there's lots of great retrievers, but yeah, that was just sort of what got me going.
Did you ever really, now that you can kind of look back on your career and your path, did you see when you first started out with training, did you see yourself in a position like this that you are today?
Not at all. I mean, not at all. I didn't see myself training dogs for a living. Like, I think my mom cried when I told her I was quitting the Elk Foundation, and like selling my house, moving to California. And she's like, what? But that's one of those things. And that's something that's really, I've found universal. When you talk to any dog trainer, nobody thought from the beginning, like,
yeah,
that's what I'm going to do for a living. Maybe a few people that, kind of grew up in it, or, there's obviously a few, but a lot of people, the story is kind of like, they had a real job, they were doing something, they got training, they were passionate about it, they just couldn't get enough of it, and it just morphed into a career.
Yeah. What does it mean for you, Karl? I mean, obviously Purina is very active across lots of different areas, from sporting dogs to organizations like ourselves, and supporting them. But in the competition world in particular, having been on the other side of it, right?
Yeah.
And seeing how much Purina supports those organizations and sporting dogs and the people behind it. What does it mean to you to be on the other side of it now?
Whenever things kind of get tough or it feels a lot like a real job, I think about that and I go, I'm really fortunate to be able to sort of like give back to what I loved and stay involved with it, even though I'm not actively competing anymore. I still get to be around it. I get to help promote it.
Yeah.
I think help make the sport better. Kind of Purina's mantra is, people and pets are better together. That's sort of our corporate philosophy. And so things that, anytime people are doing something with their dog, it's good for the dog and it's good for the person, So I think that's part of what is Purina's culture, is to try and nurture those sports and the human-dog bond. So,
and you've done an incredible job. I know just through the partnership, what Purina does for Ducks Unlimited, y'all have been incredible. You've done a phenomenal job in, like you said, pushing that needle forward for making this sport better. You've done a great job with that. We are Purina through and through. Yeah. We truly appreciate the partnership, that we have with you guys, and we're super thankful for it.
Well, working for the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, when I was there years ago, I kind of understood the value of corporate partnerships and what they bring to the table. Yep. And it's not just money. It's, of course, the money's helpful, but those kind of partnerships that go across all different levels of the business, whether it's from fundraising, banquets to podcasts to whatever, magazine stuff, it's a great relationship. And I think, Jeremy Smith always tells me, and maybe he's just being nice, but that, Purina really is is sort of the model for the corporate partner. We're involved in sustainability initiatives with funding for rice initiatives and different things. So we're active on the sustainability. We're active with the volunteers, part of the media. So it's really fun to be able to be across different parts of the business.
Yeah,
Ducks Unlimited Expo.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. DUX, y'all had probably the coolest setup at DUX.
Yeah.
That was
demonstrations were awesome,
incredible. Like, I heard so much positive feedback about y'all setup and the demonstrations. Like Nathan said, I thought it was a really cool idea of how y'all, put the ice box there where people could put their hand in there and see. Like, y'all just had a lot of really neat things there. It was right across from our duck den, so we got to see a lot of the interaction that y'all had going on there, and
the questions. People who are genuinely interested in doing more with their dog, right? And back to that mantra, people and dogs, right? I mean,
that's right.
People were just looking to get a little bit better this year in the duck blind,
And if anybody's listening and they didn't go, and this is not a plug for Purina, this is a plug for DU Expo. If you didn't go, you should go, because it was a lot of fun. Yeah, I mean, it was packed. There was from educational stuff to new gear and equipment, and I don't know. It was an amazing event.
And to think it was the first year back.
I know.
I mean, I think this upcoming year for DUX, I don't want to put any major
Everyone's
expectations.
excited.
Like when I tell you the buzz, as soon as DUX ended this year, the buzz already for next year, we're just like, it was incredible. So I think this next year is going to be even a little bit bigger of a push too. That I'm super excited.
They're going to have to expand the convention center. Man.
I know. They're just going to keep adding on to it. No. Well, we want to talk a little bit about dogs.
Yeah.
And a lot of our listeners either have a dog or are eventually going to get a dog or know somebody that has a dog. And it's something that I find super interesting just learning about. So we're going to dive into just some questions, kind of have conversations about, some things that we've talked about between me and Nathan, me and you, just to kind of chit chat and kind of give our listeners a little bit of knowledge. And one of the first things I want to talk about, and I think it's something very important, and I know that you believe it's important, Nathan does too, but it's nutrition, right, for the dogs. And of course, you know that that's important because that's what Purina is.
That's right.
But how important is it for the endurance of a dog and also the recovery of a dog after a long day in the blind, right? Because there are a lot of duck hunters, especially your hardcore duck hunters, they're not running one dog one day and then getting another one. They're running that same dog, and it's super important. But I want you to just elaborate a little bit more on that, on how important nutrition is for endurance and recovery.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of like, it depends. I think the first day that you and I hunted together, like, there was not a lot of endurance needed. I think Matt went further than the dog trying to chase down a duck. But no.
What are you eating, man?
Chicken too.
So, I think the first thing is a reality check, right? Are you hunting 4 times a year on a Saturday and you shoot half a dozen ducks maybe or something like that? If that's the case, you don't really need to do a lot of anything extra. But for that guy that is a guide, or like, some of the really serious guys that are like, I'm gonna make all 60, or whatever that deal is, then it becomes really important. Especially if it gets cold, because that really saps the heat. And then if they're fortunate and, they have a big group, shoot a lot of birds, the dog's working hard. So the main thing to know is the real fuel in food is fat. Dogs are preferential fat burners. So that's their biggest source of energy. Protein builds muscle mass. Carbs are definitely fuel, but the best source of fuel is really fat. And so if you're going to work a dog hard, and especially if it's cold, high fat diets are better. And protein helps build muscle. So you really want both. So like a 30-20 formula is great if you've got a hardworking dog and you're going to hunt them hard. I think I even see a bigger need for that type of a formula with your upland dogs, because when they go out, even if you're not getting a lot of birds, they're running the whole time, where waterfowl dogs, they could be sitting a lot of the time. But the cold really saps energy from a dog. So
that's a great point, Karl. I mean, they in a really cold climate, our friends up in North Dakota, they're burning energy just shivering, right? I mean, shaking like this, right? I mean, it just to stay warm, because their body needs that, right? So it's a great point that, cold weather, no matter what, you're going to be needing that nutrition. You know?
That's right. Like I said, it's how much they're working. The recovery is an interesting part. You asked about recovering in that, and if they are, I guess maybe the next thing before that is their body condition, right? Like if they're lean, the hunting dogs should be lean. They shouldn't be overweight. If you're going to hunt them really hard all season, you might want them, coming into the hunting season with a couple extra pounds, but not 10% overweight or something.
That's what I tell my wife.
Yeah.
I'm just getting ready for hunting season. That's it.
Well played. Yeah. So there's actually this body condition score chart. It's a Purina, and it goes from like 1 to 9, and you look at it, you look and see if you can feel their ribs or their abdominal tuck or those kind of things. And so, a little bit is having that dog maybe in shape before season, getting him on that higher fat diet ahead of season. So that's another kind of misconception, is a lot of people will say, well, I'm just going to feed them an adult formula all year, and then once I start hunting them and they get working hard, then I'm going to feed them a higher fat, higher protein. it takes a dog, 8 to 12 weeks before their body really is utilizing that high-fat diet to the best of its ability. So you really need to switch that dog to the higher-fat diet ahead of
well before that.
season.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's kind of the way I would explain it, and some scientist is going to like roll their eyes, but the way I'll explain it is if you decide you're going to go on a keto diet and try to get your body into ketosis and all that, so you're losing weight, like the first day you eat a steak, your body's not in ketosis, right? You know what I mean? Like the first day you say, well, okay, I'm eating steak today, your body has not shifted.
Correct.
It's where it's drawing its energy and nutrition from. And it's sort of the same with the dogs. It takes a little while. The other maybe caution is you don't want a hard switch from a lower fat diet to a higher fat diet. That's when, you always want to transition diets. You shouldn't just,
abruptly
switch. You can get away with it better going from a high-fat diet to a low-fat diet than you can a low-fat diet to a high-fat diet. So take a little more time that way, just because it requires, different things from pancreas and all that. Like you can get pancreatitis or different issues, loose stools, or just not, their body isn't burning that fat perfectly yet.
Yeah. Wow. That's so interesting. A lot of the stuff you just touched on, I can remember last year having the podcast episode with Dr. Ruth Ann.
Yes. Yeah.
A lot of the things we discussed, I can remember one of her points was, she said, if you really truly think about it, dog diet and stuff, a lot of the same is true to a human, right? Now, of course, there's all kinds of, factors that go into that. But exactly what you just said, if we're going to get on a diet or anything like that, you don't just go straight into that diet. Or if you're going to go on a fast, you normally don't just, boom, no food. And it's the same thing, with the dog. The things you're feeding them between protein, fats, it all plays a role. So just when you do abruptly stop or you do completely change something quick, it takes a minute for you to adjust and get climate to that.
And just like, a lot of people, and maybe we'll get to that, I don't know about when to feed and all that, just like you wouldn't eat a big meal and then go swimming in the pool, right? As a kid, whatever. I mean, you don't want to feed a dog and then go hunting right away. A lot of people say, oh, he's going to need food to stay warm. Well, when you feed the dog, when he eats, blood flow goes to his stomach to digest that food. And he's trying to do that. If he's also having to run, he needs blood flow to his muscles and to his heart and all that. So they really don't digest well with a full, when they're running. Or put it the other way, they don't run well if they're digesting food.
So you stole my next question, Karl. That was the next question is, can we go to a little bit more detail on that, on maybe how do we know that time frame when we should feed before a hunt, pre-hunt, and post-hunt for best energy and, digestion for our dogs? Like, how can we, is it a visual thing we're looking for? Is it something that we get to learn as we, are around our dog more? Like, how can we kind of put a time frame on that to best know when to feed our dogs pre-hunt or post-hunt?
And one thing I always see come up is like both the timing, right? Like how long before or after, and frequency. Yep. Right? That's what I always see. It's like, should I move it to once a day, right, versus twice a day? So if you could speak on those two, going off what you're saying, Matt.
So let's think about it this way for a second. We don't want food in their stomach when they're exercising. So now, how long does it take that food to get out of their stomach after they've eaten it? Well, part of that depends on a couple things. One is how much they ate, right? So if they, let's take a typical Labrador, and for just kind of square numbers, I'm going to say they maybe eat a pound a day. Like if it's an active, hardworking lab, I'd say 4 cups a day. There's lots of them that eat a lot less than that, but in the middle of hunt season, you're probably going to feed them 4 cups a day. So that 4 cups is going to take several hours to get out of their stomach. Now, once it's out of their stomach, it's still in their intestines, and still they're carrying that weight and all that stuff around. It's not getting through their whole system, but at least it's out of their stomach. So there's been a few studies that show, and we're going to talk a little bit about whether we should wet food or not. There's been studies that show that if you have dry kibble, it takes just kibble no water added to it, it can take up to 6 hours to get out of the stomach and into the intestine.
Yeah.
If you wet it, it should be between 2 and 4 hours because that kibble helps absorb water and that helps it digest. So I would say kind of my minimum number is 2 hours of time in between feeding and then exercising. It would be better to be more, but if you've got a dog, especially if it's maybe got hypoglycemia or something, or it's a really hard keeper, and you need to feed it twice a day, let's say it's a dog that it needs 6 cups to keep its weight on when it's really working hard. That's usually a young year to 18-month-old male that's being trained hard, worked hard. Some of those dogs can be really hard to keep weight on. And if they need more than like 4 cups a day, I really think it should be split so you're never putting too much in their stomach at one time. So in those cases, I would give them maybe a couple cups in the morning, make sure they have at least a couple hours before they exercise, and then feed them, the majority of their meal in the evening. I can tell you back when I was training, what we would do is those dogs that needed a morning meal, we would feed them first thing in the morning, like 6 o'clock. And then when we're training, we would leave them on the truck a little longer before we ran them. We'd work other dogs and try to give those guys as much time as they could. And again, if it's 1 or 2 retrieves, it's not that big a deal. But if, they're running, and the way they'll tell you is they'll break with diarrhea. I mean, if they're running a bunch, and I think, you see it the most in the bird dogs, that stress-induced diarrhea. I mean, you get a lot of these bird dogs that get running, and if they're not cleaned out before they run, they're going to have diarrhea after they start running. So I just think giving them that little bit of time in the mornings helps. Ideally, I'd say with an adult dog, not a puppy, I think up till at least a year old, they should probably get 2 meals a day if they're needing it. But I think ideally, I would say it's best to feed once a day. But there's nothing wrong with splitting it twice a day. Again, I would just make sure that do the smaller meal in the morning and then give them at least a couple hours before any exercise.
Wow.
And talk a little bit about how, that fat, even though it's given, some people, they're like, oh, I need to feed him in the morning. He needs to have energy, right? Talk a little bit about how that fat, that long-term fuel in the evening, they still have it available.
Yes. Well, here's a way to think about it. That food is not really available for the muscles. So what we're feeding the muscles so they can run, right? That food, it's not available to the muscles until like 12. I mean, the food in the stomach is not doing any good. The food that's undigested in the intestines is not doing any good. It's not until, that food is being absorbed into the muscle that it really is effective. So here's the thing to think about. The sled dog racers, they typically will feed their last meal, 12, 15, 20 hours before the race. They're not feeding them anything the morning before the race. After that first day of the race, everything else is catch up, and they're just trying to keep as much food in them as they can. But they don't start with food in their digestive system. They start with everything broken down into the muscle.
So it's not even available till 12 hours.
Exactly.
I think that's really insightful.
Yeah. Very much so. Because I feel like what you said, Nathan, a lot of hunters, not even just hunters, trainers, hunters, anytime you're training a dog, a lot of people think I got to get something in their stomach, that they can have energy out there that can feed their muscles. And like you said, it's not even until that 12-hour time frame that you're even benefiting the muscles from the food that you're feeding.
We probably liken some of it to, you've been out there in the morning, you've been cold, you come back and you have a warm bowl of soup or something like that, and it's like, man, you feel a lot better. And I'm sure that putting a little warm liquid in the dog and a little bite at lunchtime or something like that is not going to hurt. You just don't want to do a big meal where you're putting a lot into them. I think it's probably more important that they're drinking, staying hydrated. That's probably the best thing we can do during the day is make sure that they're drinking some, because most duck dogs I know, when they're hunting, they're not interested in water, food, anything, right? They're just hunting. Yeah. Kind of like, not like me. I'm probably more eating snacks. Yeah.
I'm eating my honey bun.
Hoping a bird flies by.
What is your go-to snack?
Golly, I don't know. It's hard to beat a Pop-Tart in a blind bag. Yeah.
But if you sit on that Pop-Tart, or you smush up against it in your blind bag,
yeah,
you go to eat
done
it.
Yeah.
You're eating
We don't need to
crumbs.
go down a rabbit hole of the Pop-Tart cases or
Hey,
anything.
I used to have
Yeah.
or know a friend that did.
Yeah.
Those were incredible.
Cases, really?
A case for a Pop-Tart holder.
Wow.
Yeah.
You got to ask Jimbo about those.
Yeah. They're incredible. No. Okay, so we talked a little bit about pre-hunt.
Yep.
Now let's talk a little bit about post-hunt feeding.
Mhm.
You know, I know a lot of hunters that as soon as their dog gets back, they're like, I got to feed my dog. What is typical best practice for feeding a dog post-hunt?
One thing I'll say is dogs do well on a routine. So feeding about the same time every day is a good thing. They don't, they kind of know what to expect. However, I'll tell you, it's also true that if a dog has been exercising, there's a period of time, within 45 minutes of when they were working, that they're sort of primed for nutrient uptake afterwards. So there's a lot of, they used to come out with, in fact, Purina had them. We don't have them available now, but it was called a refuel bar. It was like a glycogen replacement. And you would give that bar within 30 minutes of exercise, and that would really help glycogen replacement. The muscles are sort of primed to uptake that. So you could also say that if you want to have a lot of time between digestion and working again, there's nothing wrong at all with if you do a morning hunt, come back and you like to feed your dog at noon that day, you get back in from the hunt and feed them their meal. I don't think that's a bad strategy at all. I think, it would maybe help with absorption of the food and then give them plenty of time to get everything processed through their system.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I would say typically I would probably advocate for dogs being on a sort of a regular schedule, like whatever it is, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. They just kind of work that way. But especially if you're trying to catch up, if they're skinny, give them a meal when you get done at the end of the hunt. I think it's not a bad idea.
Yeah. Wow. That's all so cool just to learn.
It's sort of common sense, but it's sort of not. You know what I mean? Like some of it is, and people worry about things. It just depends. You don't really want to do a big lunch if you're going to go hunt again in the evening, though. Like if you're hunting in the evening, then I would skip it.
Like you said, this may be common sense to a lot of people, but there's also a lot of people that are first-time dog owners that have no idea about any practice that they should follow as far as feeding, as far as what to look for when it comes to that. So I'm sure this is benefiting somebody. It's benefited me just listening.
I know it's not on the list, Matt, but we're talking about, how important hydration is too, Karl. How do you go about encouraging that in a dog when it's cold out and they really don't want to take it?
You bet.
And if you are adding it to the food, how much water versus ratio to that type of thing?
Good question. So I float my dog's food every day. So even hunting season, I think it's really important, especially if you're on a trip. It does make it a little more palatable, so warm water even more so. So if you've got like a picky eater, you can put a little warm water on the food, maybe mix in either some canned food with it, or I tend to use Fortiflora, which is a probiotic, but it tastes really good. So we'll add Fortiflora to water or to their dinner.
I've done that too.
Yeah.
They really like it when it's,
They do. So, I think back to kind of growing up when we'd hunt on the Chesapeake Bay and it was salt water and you'd be out there. We never even thought about the poor dogs, it was like, hopefully they drink something somewhere. They'll probably live through the day, maybe not. It's just, they're pretty amazing what they can do. Like if you're in a boat and, you're in salt water and they don't have fresh water, I would probably encourage somebody to bring fresh water now that I know more and try and get them to drink a little bit of fresh water in the blind or in their boat. But if you're hunting for 3 or 4 hours, they're fine. Just make sure they get water as soon as they get back. The biggest time to make sure a dog has water is after it eats. About, an hour to 2 hours after dinner, they really need water at that time. So,
and why is that?
To help with the digestion of the food.
Gotcha.
That food, that kibble, it needs water to absorb.
And how much, when you're floating your dog's food, how much, are you just getting enough cover, or are you adding? Yeah.
No, I'd say like you might do your cereal. You know
what I
I mean?
was about to
say. That kind of ratio.
Now, some people like more milk than other people, but I would say
I don't eat my cereal with milk.
Yeah.
I can't.
But it's kind of, just maybe up to the top of the food. You don't
Gotcha.
want to overdo it.
Yeah.
Then it gets hard for them to eat. If it's like, if it's drowned down in there, then they're biting through
Just enough to float it a little bit. And
just enough to kind of get almost to the top of it. If it's too
Gotcha.
much, you'll see they got to bite it, and then there's just water everywhere. It's kind of difficult for them.
Yeah, I know, Matt, you had some other questions on cold weather and stuff, but want to ask while we're kind of on these subjects and we're talking about Fortiflora, traveling with your dog,
Yep.
right?
Yes.
How do you go about, talk a little bit about how probiotics help with dog's gut, right? And how dogs store stress in their gut,
bet.
that type of thing.
You bet. Well, I'll tell you my best story is for 15 years, we would go from Montana to Texas in about 3 days. And we, when you've got 24 to 36 dogs going, that trip, invariably you've got dogs getting diarrhea in their crates and their kennels, and you're, trying to clean them out at some rest area somewhere. It's that kind of travel with a lot of dogs is a lot of stress, not only on the dog, but on the dog owner. And, you're trying to make sure that wherever you're airing them, they're not finding chicken bones. It's just like, it's tough. And we would invariably have dogs getting diarrhea. And the last 3 years that I was traveling were the first 3 years that Fortiflora came out. And we started before the trip at Bob West's, who was my predecessor, at his recommendation. We started dosing the dogs about 3 days ahead. We put them all on Fortiflora, and we left them on Fortiflora through the trip. And I would say I went from maybe a half a dozen dogs starting to get diarrhea on that trip to almost none. I mean, like it just about completely stopped it. So I realized it was obviously doing something, and that's not a very scientific experiment or not a peer-reviewed study. However, it was my study, and I can tell
It
you,
worked.
I stand by it. Yeah. So
I do it for all my dogs when I
Yes.
travel too,
Yep.
and I think it makes a huge
I
difference.
do too.
Yep. So yeah, that's good stuff to have on handy, especially if you're a duck hunter who likes to travel.
Yes.
Having some Fortiflora.
Yep. Like
And
I say,
I think that's an important point that you mentioned too, priming them a few days before travel.
yes.
Because same
Yep.
thing, getting that through their system.
Yep.
Yeah.
For some dogs, travel is not terribly stressful, but I would say for the majority of dogs, it is stressful traveling. I mean, they're either confined or bounce around. They're off their routine. If you got a bunch of dogs, like when we would go compete, there's dogs barking and different things going on. They're not sleeping well. So I truly think that putting them on a probiotic like that is super helpful.
And so, what are some things waterfowl hunters can look for in their dog as far as fatigue goes and as far as low energy goes? What should they be looking for in their dog whenever they're out hunting as far as hunting in cold weather?
Yep. I'd say the biggest thing, just like we start to shake and shiver, if you've ever seen a cold dog, it's pretty obvious. They're sitting there, shaking, shivering. Now, sometimes, so this is where it takes a little bit of maybe thoughtfulness. Sometimes they can shiver and be excited from excitement. You know what I mean? Just like you might be excited, a dog can be the same way. But odds are, if it's below 40 degrees or 50, 40, the dog's wet, they're sitting there. If the water's not getting off of them, they can get cold. It doesn't have to be below freezing for a dog to get cold. If they're in the water a lot, I would really encourage people to try and make sure they have some way for a dog to
Get out of the water.
get dried off. Most dog stands, the water runs off, but if, like a kennel cot or like those little Momarsh stands or something where when the dog's laying there next to you, that water can drip off and they're not sitting in water. Anytime, like if you're in a pit blind and you got one of the little metal hides on the side, make sure that there's something that water gets off the dog. It really helps, they make these chamois or just use a towel, but the chamois, you can squeeze it out.
Yeah.
I know Avery makes them. I don't know who else might make them, but it's great. It's like, I think they call it a dog zorber.
Yeah.
and just wipe the dog off, kind of get them dried off, so that fur is not just matted against them. And then, of course, a vest.
That's what I was about to
I mean, that's kind of maybe the first step, but sometimes they can still be pretty darn cold with a vest on. You need to reach underneath that vest and feel your dog's belly, and you'll be able to feel. And I guess that's probably one of the first things that, if they're shaking and cold, put your hands on them and feel what they feel like. And then if they're getting cold and shivering a lot, probably one of the easiest, best things is just to get them, bring a bumper or something like that and run them a little bit, get them moving. It's the long swims that suck the cold out of them. Those, if they're immersed in the water for a long swim, those swims really deplete the heat out of them. So I think that's the biggest time to worry about warming them back up.
Yeah, I've been on some hunts, like you said, where it's cold, and but I've also been on some hunts where they'll see some ducks working and they just start shaking.
Yeah,
looking. They're like, "Are you cold? Or are you that excited?"
Yeah.
Or
I think that's where you feel them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can kind of tell more by putting your hands on them. And if it's really cold and you take your hand out of your glove and you put them on, you'll see how cold what they got to
And
deal
you're just
with.
looking for excessive shaking,
Yes.
right? I mean, because they're
Yeah.
going to be
Yeah.
shaking.
Yes.
To some degree, no matter what,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Been a lot of people getting alarmed with that, but when you're like, okay,
Yeah.
he's been shaking for 30 minutes.
Yeah, or they start getting acting a little lethargic, or they start acting a little
Disoriented,
different.
yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's for sure. It's sort of like the heat thing, It's a scale, and they can get warm as long as they can get cooled back off.
Yeah.
They can get a little cold as long as they can get warm back up. But if they're the only time I've truly ever seen a dog that I thought truly had hypothermia and was in danger was we were pheasant hunting in South Dakota with somebody, and this was a guy in our group, and the dog had run. He put him back in the crate in the back of the pickup truck, and it got cold, and the crate was kind of wet in there. And we drove back to the hotel, and the guy went to get the dog out, and that dog was literally cold. I mean, you could tell that dog was hypothermic. It had been wet in that crate. It wasn't a Labrador. I think it was a wire hair or something. But so I always tell people, make sure, never put them back up in a crate, wet, cold.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're cold, don't put them back in a crate.
Yeah.
That's where I think more likely something will happen, because you don't have your eyes on them. If they're sitting next to you in the blind and they start getting disoriented, or acting really cold, or something's weird, you'll see it. But if they're in the back of that crate, they had worked all day, they got cold, you didn't think about it, they got in the crate, you drive home, the temperature's dropping. I think that's where it's more concerning.
Is there any just overall degree of weather that you're like, no shot in taking a dog in that? Like, is there a number that
That old question, how cold is too cold? Right?
And I know that there's factors.
Is that
into
my
that.
number, or is that the dog's number? My number is about 0. I'm pretty sure after 0.
I know that there's
good.
factors into that.
Yeah.
If you're not going to if you're hunting a dry field and you got a great kennel, he can get in and stay warm. Maybe you could take him out in a little bit worse conditions, versus if you're going to be in a pond that's got an ice eater in it, and it's keeping the water open, but it's negative 10. You don't want to take your dog out in that. But is there a number that Karl Gunzer says, I'm not taking a dog?
I'm going to do my best politician answer here. And I'm going to say probably not a particular number.
Yeah.
I grew up on the Chesapeake Bay.
Now, here's what I'll say. What about this number? Where does your dog live? So that's why I don't like that number. If your dog lives in your house, which I'm all for, don't get me wrong, but you keep it at 72 degrees.
That's what he's accustomed to.
And then you go out. That's a lot different than a dog that lives outside, lives in a kennel. Now, obviously, in that outside kennel, he's got to have warm bedding and stuff, but that dog will acclimate to colder weather, just like they acclimate to heat. You guys know down here, you bring a dog from up north and you bring it down here to dove hunt. I mean, it's kind of like...
Just like us. Yeah. I spent my first 2 years here in front of an AC. So.
Yeah. So, every dog is different, but it makes a big difference if that dog is a house dog or a kennel dog.
Yeah.
So,
good answer.
0 might be fine for that kennel
I'd
dog. And it
vote
might
for
be
you.
way too cold. It might be way too cold for your 72 and sunny dog. Yeah.
No, that's a good
And
answer.
it's a great point too about the lawn swims. You know, like if you don't need to send your dog, you know, like if it's right there lying, you know, you don't need to have him in the water every time. You know, especially on those really cold days.
Yep.
You know, that cold water just zaps them.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I think the best thing is if they're, you know, if you're doing some retrieves in that cold water is find a way to get them warm in between. Even if you got to
and
chuck
out of
a
the
bumper
wind.
on the land a little bit. Yeah, absolutely. You know, they don't feel wind chill like we do, but it still affects them. You know what I mean? It's a little different.
Yeah.
It's still evaporating that air off of them.
What are your favorite go-to routines for recovery post-hunt?
Me, I like usually a cocktail. And no, I'm here for the dog. Oh, okay. No, I'm good. I think warm food and sleep. I mean, like I said, there used to be some different supplements to try and do some glycogen replacement. There's still some brands out there that make it. And if you have a dog that, you know, you're having a hard time getting water or weight on, you're working them every day, I would say that's worth looking into, whether it's like a maltodextrin type deal.
Yeah.
But that's a good strategy to get energy back in a dog that's working hard day after
Warm
day.
sleep food.
Yep.
Yeah. That's good. Same way with us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Give
Just-
me a biscuit,
Yeah.
so a fire, and a bed after I
That's
hunt,
right.
and I'm good to go.
Warm glass of milk. That's what I like.
No. All right. We talked a little bit ago about how there are some people I'm sure listening, first time dog owners, right? What is the most common mistake you see first time dog owners make?
I would say so. Dogs are situational. So there can be dogs that can listen great in a house and terrible in a blind, or great in a blind and terrible in a house. But I would say overall, dogs like things to be consistent. And I think, you know, people think about training and they think about taking the dog out with a bunch of bumpers and throwing marks or working on steadiness in the field. And that's what they perceive as training. But every time they're interacting with that dog that lives in their house, they're training. And so you can get a lot done when you're not training by making a dog go to a place, making it wait before you open the door, making it be quiet, making it wait before you feed it, do those kind of things. And I think a lot of people think of training as a specific
Formal thing.
formal job, and it's more of it's a lifestyle. It's you know,
100%.
yeah, it's all the time. So I think maybe that's the biggest thing. I'm not a huge fan of like what I call mindless exercise. So I never liked fun bumpers. I think I've seen a lot of dogs, good ones, get hurt, shoulders, ankle, wrists, whatever, because a fun bumper, they just rip out there and grab it and turn and do things. And so I think structured fun and always making the dog do something to get something. I mean, and dogs love that. Like it's chaining. It's Pavlov's dogs. It's the way their little minds work is do something to get something. And once they have that, like all the fun happens through you.
Yeah.
It's not going out here and sniffing and chasing other dogs. It's like, oh, wait a minute, Matt gives me fun, Nathan gives me fun. And so they become tuned in with you. And so I think kind of the biggest thing is just focusing on training and not just everyday life.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think people underestimate how much those fun bumpers can bring back their steadiness too,
Yeah.
Like they're used to just 3 seconds and name and every retrieve is mine and blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
And dogs just, you'll see that steadiness slip,
Yep. Yep. I would rather just make them do something every time, be steady every time. Have them sit, throw the bumper, call them to you, then go get it, or just different things so that it doesn't become a routine. If it just becomes mindless excitement. And you see that in, you ever watch like Fly Ball or Fast Cat or some of those deals? it's just endorphin. Like that dog is just in full out prey chase. It's not really thinking anymore. It's just
reacting.
Yeah.
And as a result, you're not challenging the dog too.
Right.
And I think
there's no mental aspect to it. It's only physical.
Exactly.
And I have started riding horses now, is what I've been competing in and messing with. And if ever there was a case of needing to stay in their mind, you learn that with the horses too. It's kind of like the old joke: if your horse is having fun, you probably aren't. It's kind of that way. The dogs can have fun, but it still should be structured fun.
Yeah. And you get a Labrador from a good hunting line, and you do that too much. I mean, a lot of people, they're like, dog needs exercise. That is just, I mean, you hear that all the time.
That's exactly right.
And you'll have a dog who's way more stimulated all the time because, to your point, it's just that compulsion, like, retrieve.
Yes.
And there's no thought behind it. And as a result, I mean, there's no mental fatigue, which is so important, right?
Yep.
A dog, like, if you challenge a dog with a retrieve that they have to really think about navigating cover or maintaining the line or whatever, you'll see the dog, you could do way less, right, as far as time, and your dog will be exhausted.
I could not agree with you more.
Yeah.
I don't think I could put it any better either. That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah.
Something I'm learning now with my 1-year-old.
Child or Chesapeake?
Lab.
Lab.
Oh, man. Well, we've thrown some hard questions at you. Got a couple fun questions here for the end of the podcast. You've been around the game a long time, seen a lot of good dogs. What is the most unforgettable dog that you've ever worked with or trained? There's got to be one.
Tough one.
There's a couple. There's got to
be
you
that
need
one.
All right. Probably, man, I don't know. It's not many great ones, but there's a couple. The one dog, his name was Bowie. He actually sired a national field champion. He was not one. He never finished a national. He broke in the 9th series of a national one time in really good shape, but he was really just an amazing marker. Like he could remember birds. He won his first open. He had both cruciates done like as a 2-year-old. So he missed a lot of young foundational time, but he was a phenomenal marker. And unfortunately, between his cruciates and then he ended up with a bad shoulder and all this stuff, he was kind of a physical nightmare, but he was just his memory was amazing. And I'll never forget the first open he won. It was like the hardest open I think I've ever seen. And it was his second open to run.
Wow.
So the first open, I lost him on the water blind in the first series and then in the third series. And his second open he won. It was in Utah, and it was just this huge mark. No other dogs even really came close to it, and he just stepped on it. It was just a phenomenal. So Colonel Bowie's Revenge.
Colonel Bowie. Yeah. Revenge. That's
probably the other dog that actually won 2 Canadian nationals. He never won a U.S. national. Night Wings Marsh leader, they called him Guide. And
that's a cool name.
He was really amazing. He was a field champion at either 2 or 3, but he was phenomenal as well.
I've never been around a dog of that nature. This may be a dumb question.
Yeah.
You may be like,
No.
But were those 2 dogs that you just mentioned, were they just all-time competitors, or were they also one that was a loving dog as far as, was it one you could put in your truck and he would want to ride with you and love on you, or no, they were, because I've heard that a lot of those dogs that they're on this earth to do one thing, and that is do his job.
Yep. So Bowie, he came to me basically as a mostly kennel dog. He was in the house some. He didn't live in our house, but he could be in the house. And as he got older, he would come in. But I can tell you that guide dog, as a 2 and 3-year-old, he was in our house, and he would lay there just crashed out like he was the most chill dog ever.
So he had a switch.
And then, he for sure had a switch.
Wow.
And I think most of them do. If they kind of are a house dog as a young dog and they learn that routine, they sort of never forget it. If they're house broke young and they get it, they know and they like it.
Yeah. And to what we talked about before, if they're getting the right training.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I don't.
Not
all
all
they
that
know it's
ramp,
time to
ramp,
get-
ramp.
Yeah,
You know.
I don't let them be an idiot in the house either.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? One of two things are happening. They're either going to get trained or they're going to get kicked out. So
Got a choice. Huh?
Yeah. But I think that's I would encourage, and these dogs, they have you own them year round, you get 60 days of duck hunting or whatever you do, and no matter what, even if you field trial, could there be some cases that you could argue for them, like, hey, they'd have less bad habits if they live in the kennel. They'd be more acclimated if they live in the kennel, all that. I think you'd miss so much from the whole human-animal experience that I'm a big advocate of all my dogs live in the house.
And I
they
feel
may
like
have
that
a kennel, some
bond-
too, but
I feel like it's a little bit different of a bond when they
you bet.
do
Yep.
live in the house.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. What's one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time dog owner? And you can think on that for a second.
All right.
If you need to. I know
Seconds up.
That's a curveball.
I forgot. I was going to look at these questions for so if you're, buying a dog, a first-time dog owner, you're buying a dog, research the puppy and don't worry. I mean, the puppy price is the most inexpensive thing in the whole equation. So, like, don't go, oh man, there's a really good breeding for $2,000, but this one's $1,000, so I'm going to buy it. Don't, buy the best puppy. I would absolutely do your research, look at the parents, see what their disposition's like, learn more about their parents. I always said you never really know a dog until you know it in training. You'd see some dogs at field trials and they could be outstanding, but they took a lot of training to get there. And there's other dogs that are just kind of easier to train, more natural. I would say look at the parents if at all possible and try and see what they're like. I'll tell you another one that became a big thing for me is I don't like aggressive dogs. I mean, they shouldn't be aggressive. There's some dogs that, you always have to worry about or watch. Stay away from that, and don't buy if a dog's sire or whatever shows aggressive tendencies, whatever the breed. That's not something you need to worry about as a hunting dog. You're going to go hunting with other friends, be around other dogs. That's just
Especially if you're a
life
first-time dog owner. I feel like having one that was aggressive would be a whole different
It's rough.
learning curve.
Yes, it's hard. So, amazingly, I couldn't tell you the last time that I got a dog that didn't have enough retrieve drive. If you buy a dog from field trial lines, and I never had British dogs. I only did U.S. field trials. I have trained a few British dogs since then. All of them have had drive, maybe not as much, but they've all had plenty of drive to be hunting dogs. So I don't see that as big of a deal as it used to be. Just seems like they all tend to
have that drive.
Yeah, and maybe don't overdo it. Do more little training stuff than just throwing bumpers and throwing dummies and chasing wings.
Less is more.
Yeah. Don't shoot over them when they're puppies. Do all that stuff right.
Yeah, we could spend the next half
I know,
hour.
right? Yeah, that's a rabbit hole. But I guess, if they're going to be a hunting dog, they got to be able to do two things. They got to like birds and they can't be gun shy. So don't mess that up from the start, right?
Yeah.
Be careful not to make them gun shy and do a proper introduction to birds because that's a lifelong deal right there.
Yeah, and one thing I think first-time owners could get a little hung up on is tending to look to others, right? Like they look at their friend who's got a 4-month-old doing, a 100-yard memory or something like that. Yep. Every dog is different.
You bet.
So just enjoy it. Don't put that pressure on yourself,
Absolutely.
Just think you get too much. It's the same thing with people in social media. You're looking at your friends doing this stuff, and that's just focus on the dog in front of you. Enjoy them.
Yeah.
They don't. I look at those same pile pictures and I go, man, I get about one of those a year, and don't post the other 30 hunts. Yeah.
No. Well, Karl, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast. Nathan, thank you for joining us as well. Also want to thank our podcast producer, Mr. Chris Isaac, and also thank you to our listeners for tuning in. But y'all stay tuned, because here in a couple days, we got a really cool episode coming out around Thanksgiving that is talking about gear, good holiday Thanksgiving memories. You won't want to miss it. Make sure you stay tuned to the Ducks Unlimited podcast.
Thank you for listening to the DUPodcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing. Also proudly sponsored by Bird Dog Whiskey and Cocktails. Whether you're winding down with your best friend or celebrating with your favorite crew, Bird Dog brings award-winning flavor to every moment. Enjoy responsibly. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit ducks.org/DUPodcast. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, stay tuned to the Ducks.